Welcome to the month of November, where chaos is fully on display every Saturday. And you know what? That's a good thing in the SEC because it just shows you how deep this conference is. And that was proven in the month of October, where massive upsets occurred. We had countless firings across the college football landscape. And now we got to figure out which teams were contenders or pretenders. November is where we're going to separate the two who are sitting in that gray area. But before we do that and go enter the most chaotic month of the college football season, let's give out some superlatives for October. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. It's Cole Thompson here. Like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we're on the race to 30,000 subs, and we talk about your team every single day. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, link in the description, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And as always, we're presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Go sign up today, fanduel.com/SECU. Get started with $300 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Sign up today. It's free. FanDuel.com/SECU. All right, as per usual, let's just start this thing off with the best team in the month of October. I don't think it really needs to be said. We all know who it was. It was Alabama. And that's not me saying that, again, Texas A&M, what they've been able to accomplish isn't good, but Alabama made history this past month. The first team in SEC history to win 4 ranked games over a 4-week period without a bye. And 3 of them came against Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Tennessee. So you got to ask yourself at this point, with how well that they have been able to perform in the Georgia matchup, in the Vanderbilt matchup, in the Missouri matchup, and then to be able to go on the road and face off against South Carolina, where it felt like this was where the other shoe was going to drop, and then ultimately they forced their way back in with Jeremy Bernard, with Ty Simpson, with the great defensive stop by Deontay Lawson and Tim Keenan, how well they've been able to respond offensively, how great the defense has been able to look, with the ability to trust the run game at times. How did you lose to Florida State week 1? Like every single week, it's more so turning to, hey, Alabama's really good. But now you're just asking yourself, what the hell went wrong when you went to Tallahassee, especially looking at how Florida State has performed ever since that week 1 win? The player of the month. Now, a lot of you would probably say, well, you already said Alabama, so you got to go with Ty Simpson, right? Wrong. It's Marcel Reed. Nobody has gained more ground in the race for the Heisman Trophy than the quarterback down in College Station. Not only did he have a signature win on the road in Death Valley, he has been the backbone and probably the main reason why this offense is humming currently at Kyle Field. Look at his numbers in the month of October. Over 800 passing yards, nearly 900 passing yards, 13 total touchdowns, only 1 sack, a passer rating of 154.6. That's number 1 currently in the SEC. He also rushed for 230 yards, so over 1,000 total yards of offense, 4 turnovers. Now, the 4 turnovers is bad, but when you look at how they happened and you look at also what was able to occur in between that, the big-time run against LSU for a 41-yard scramble, you talk about the comeback victories and the ability to be able to extend plays against Arkansas, the massive win over Florida at home, all the things that just needed to go ahead and hit their stride at the right time. Marcel Reed is certainly put himself in that conversation. He is like the forgotten child that everyone seems to not remember over the summer, and then they come back and they look awesome. That was Marcel Reed from September to October. He turned the corner. He looked the part of exactly what you wanted in a quarterback that could lead your team to the college football playoff. And he has Texas A&M sitting at 8-0 going into the month of November. And that feels like a guaranteed lock to go to the college football playoff when looking at their schedule. Best coach. It's got to be Kalen DeBoer, right? Kalen DeBoer getting 3 signature wins against ranked teams, and then to be able to make sure that the allegations were thrown at the wayside. It's now extinct because everyone knew that Kalen DeBoer could win the big one. When you throw a number next to the name, when you say, oh, look at what Alabama does when they face off against a top 10 team and they dismantle opponents. Yeah, that looks pretty good on paper. But then you have to worry about the South Carolina game. And for South Carolina, you're sweating bullets a little bit going into the 4th quarter. Alabama with the bad muff punt. This is where it all comes crashing down. They're not going to be able to respond. You know what Kalen DeBoer did while wearing the hoodie of deliverance of death? He said, okay, no panic. We got this. Went on down, scored a touchdown, went on down, forced a fumble, went on down, scored another touchdown when clearly they just could have gone for the easy kneel down, get the game-winning field goal, call it a day there. Kalen DeBoer has now answered the questions of, can you win on the road? Can you win against a non-ranked team? Can you show up and show on out when your backs are against the wall? Yeah. Check, check, check. If that doesn't answer who is the player of the month, I don't know what does. Because in my opinion, that shows you how dominant Alabama has been since he has taken on over and how many more differences has put them in a position to where now it feels like they are going to be a threat to continue to build off of the success for 2026 and beyond. Best win, Texas A&M versus LSU. Folks, I don't know if you actually realize Texas A&M nearly hung 500 yards against a defense that came into the weekend as a top 10 scoring unit in college football. They had 2 massive turnovers in the first half, and it didn't matter. They outscored LSU 35-7 in the second. They had a punt return for a touchdown. They had 4 touchdowns 4 touchdowns inside the red zone. They had explosive plays, 10 of over 15 yards downfield. And for all the people out there that were wondering, okay, well, it's Texas 8-4. It's going to be Texas 8-4 out in College Station. They haven't played anybody. They went into the belly of the beast, what I consider to be the most challenging place to play in college football, and they handled business. And more specifically, they didn't just handle business, they manhandled LSU. So much so that the entire organization and the state of Louisiana got together that night and said, Brian Kelly ain't it. Like, do you understand how big of a performance that is to make sure that you fire your coach at a place like LSU, known for being able to win national titles every 4 years with a new signal caller? And they said, nope, not the guy. That to me shows how dominant of a program you are and how much Mike Elko has changed the entire identity of Texas A&M. And if that doesn't scream big game and best moment, I don't know really what will. Top transfer portal player. We need to talk about this guy a lot more because he's not getting talked about enough in the prominent light. I think it's absolutely no questions asked Xaiver Atkins from Auburn. He's new. He was at LSU last year. Have you seen his numbers this point? In the month of October, he had 33 total tackles. He had 3 straight games of 10-plus tackles. He had a career-high 13 tackles in the win against Arkansas. On top of that, he had 4 sacks in the last 2 games. He leads the SEC with 13 tackles for losses. In the game against Texas A&M, which was in the month of September, but still, he had an interception on Marcel Reed, returned 73 yards, and brought life back to the likes of the Plains. He's done everything that you wanted. And because if he plays at Auburn, and Auburn right now is doing with a bunch of other things behind closed doors, we don't really talk about what 17 has been. And that's a godsend. And that's a player that moving forward, whoever is the next head coach out on the Plains, you got to make sure that he is happy, content, that he is well positioned to be a prominent role player long term. Because I can tell you what, 17 is going to get paid. And 17 is going to be a player that gets a lot of attention this offseason, especially because the new head coach is coming on in. The first person on defense that I'm making sure is happy is Xaiver Atkins because he has been everything as advertised and certainly put himself in a position to where I think that you understand how fantastic of a player he is. Top freshman, I'm going to go Courtland Guillory from Oklahoma. Now, Guillory, if you guys remember, had some very mishaps early on in the season. Did not look that great against Texas at times. Did not look that great against Auburn at times. He got burnt by Cam Coleman. In the month of October, just the month of October alone, he had 4 pass breakups. On top of that, he also had 11 tackles. He only allowed 1 touchdown in coverage. And this is a freshman. And just a reminder of everyone who you got to remember who he went up against. He shut down Nick Harbor. He did not allow a touchdown against Texas with Ryan Wingo. And he only allowed 1 major play downfield to, I believe it was Harrison Wallace in the Ole Miss game. On top of that, he was phenomenal in coverage. And again, this is Oklahoma that we're talking about, a program that is known for having solid defensive players. But it's a freshman that's having to earn his count and having to kind of play out of position. Having to play out of necessity. And he's gotten better with time. Going into the month of November, he will have an opportunity to face off against multiple talented receivers, including Ryan Williams at Alabama, including Aaron Anderson at LSU. And then, of course, you got to throw in Donovan O at Missouri. And he has an opportunity to really change and alter the pathway of how we view the position in general because of just how fantastic he has been in coverage. He is locked down, getting better per rep. And a big reason why I think that if you look currently at the status of Oklahoma and their defense, a reason to believe that he may be able to turn the corner. Now, was his game against Tennessee a little bit iffy? Yeah, that's for case, but we're talking about the month of October, not the month of November. Really solid overall day, I think, for the guy out of Texas, who's now playing in Oklahoma. Top play in the regular season, I think that this is pretty easy. It's the Casey Concepcion 79-yard punt return. Because for me personally, when I saw Casey Concepcion once again against a team like LSU, be able to slice and dice, pick apart, go find small creases, turn upfield, turn on the Jets, and waltz his way into the end zone. That was where I decided to say, you know what, Texas A&M is good enough to win a national title. Now, still a lot has to happen. So I got to face off against South Carolina. Still have to play on the road against Missouri. So I got to go face off against Texas. But if all things go according to plan, we're talking about potentially an 11-1 team, maybe even 12-0. That moment is where I think that many people who had their still slim doubts on Texas A&M not being viewed as a legit threat to go ahead and win it all, they kind of had to quiet themselves because you're winning through the air, you're winning on the ground, you're winning with a great defense. Well, special teams has got to be your weak point. Nope, can't even be a weak point there because Conception did it against bad teams, and now he's doing it against solid teams. And he's just making play after play after play. 8-7, very special down in College Station. Very much a player that I would not want to go toe-to-toe with right now and currently in the sport. Top storyline, seat is on fire in the SEC. We are going to see potentially up to 7 and 8 new coaching staffs be brought in this offseason. Because Sam Pittman, he's out of a job. He was the first one fired in October. Billy Napier, he's out of a job. Fired right after in the month of October. Brian Kelly, he's out of a job. Fired after that week. And then you got to throw in, even though it's a month of November at this point, Hugh Freeze, the writing was on the wall, and according to reports, there was already conversations of a buyout happening after the Missouri game. That's 4 coaches already out of a job. I do not know if Mark Stoops is going to be around that much longer. That's 5. You have to ask yourself the Lane Kiffin situation down with Ole Miss, and of course, Eli Trinkwitz at Missouri. That's potentially 7. We don't know entirely what's going to happen with Jeff Levy down at Mississippi State, even though I think he's safe. So 7 to 8 jobs could become available, whether it be a hot seat or a coaching search carousel being on the horizon that nobody expected before we get to 2026 spring ball. Like, that's crazy to imagine. This time last year, nobody in the SEC was fired. This time, a year later, we're fast forwarding 12 months, 5 to 7 jobs could become made available. I think that's a major storyline that we need to be talking about more. And the underrated storyline is cooperation or cannibalization. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, because Texas and Oklahoma, they didn't want to die. They wanted to go ahead and say, you think that we're just Big 12 teams that are going to lay down dormant, not play up to the standard of the SEC? Okay, bet. So we're going to win almost every single one of our games. We're going to pull off an upset against Tennessee in the month of November, and we're going to be in the hunt for the college football playoff. We may be 9-3, but you look at our schedule, very much a conversation starter. Hey, Texas, you look dreadful against Kentucky. Yeah, but you win. You look awful against Mississippi State. Yeah, but you win. And the Florida game is not really that great anymore when you look at it from the standpoint of Billy Napier being fired, but still, that's a loss, but it's one conference loss. They have an opportunity to go 10-2. Oh, and if that's not enough, Missouri has an opportunity to go 10-2. They have a head-to-head against both Texas A&M and also against Oklahoma. Let's say they win both those games. Well, now they're 10-2 going into the final week of the regular season. Oh, and Vanderbilt, they lost Texas this past weekend, even though it's in the month of November. They win the table, they'll be 10-2. And Alabama's still going to be in the conversation. And then you got to throw in, of course, what you got with Ole Miss. Then you got to throw in Texas A&M. We could have 7 teams be anywhere between 11-1 and 10-2 going into the college football playoff selection committee. Or we have cannibalization, which is where Alabama knocks out Oklahoma, but Oklahoma knocks out Missouri. Missouri then gives a loss to Texas A&M, and Texas A&M then knocks out Texas. So the cannibalization means, oh, but we had 6 to 7 teams still fighting for a college football playoff berth. And then the committee goes and they look at the schedules and they say, okay, well, 9-3, 9-3, 9-3, 9-3, 9-3. We're not letting in 9-3 teams. So there's 3 SEC teams that are going to the playoff this year. And you cost yourself. It's a very underrated storyline that I think more people need to be paying attention to. You can either help yourself out and get as much representation as possible by allowing a few wins here and there, which the SEC is not going to do, or you can cannibalize yourself and take your entire team out of the conversation from the get-go. Biggest comeback, absolutely got to be Alabama. I mean, Kalen DeBoer defying the odds. Everyone was ready to right away. They were already typing away on the keyboard. Hey, Kalen DeBoer, there we go. Look at this. Finding a way to lose to an unranked team on the road. Oh, here comes Ty Simpson. Oh, look at that. That's some great trickery on that play. He's in the end zone. Okay, now we got ourselves an 8-point ball game. Well, Lenore Sellers is going to run that. Oh, no. Look, Deontay Lawson. Big time strip set. Tim Keenan. Guy says the disrespect will be handled against Florida State. Well, the disrespect that he was hearing on Twitter during halftime, that was being handled right there on the field. And Jeremy Bernard walking it in for a 6-point swing in favor of the Crimson Tide. I think that's a big comeback because a lot of people still were out here saying, well, Kalen DeBoer can win against anybody. We'll watch him do it against Kirby. Watch him do it against Dan Lanning. And he's beaten Steve Sarkisian, but he has losses to Clark Lee and Brent Venables, and he nearly found a way to drop the ball against Hugh Freeze, and he lost to Josh Heupel. He can't do it against Shane Beamer, can he? You're right. He can't. And so that now changed the narrative of what we think about him as a head coach, and more specifically about Alabama underneath his regime. The biggest surprise, in my opinion, firing Brian Kelly. I knew that Brian Kelly was probably on a hot seat. I think many people also understood that Brian Kelly's days in Baton Rouge were numbered. I just figured it would be this time next year. Because that $53 million buyout is very, very tricky when you look at the positioning of things. And LSU was a team that spent money, put itself in a position to where they could go out and make plays in the transfer portal, and had a roster that on paper looked like a top 10 team. But we don't play games on paper. We play games based off of how you look. And Brian Kelly wanted to do things his way. And Brian Kelly never wanted to embrace the state of Louisiana. And Brian Kelly never wanted to ask for help from the people in Louisiana. And ultimately, when you lose to Texas A&M in that fashion, when you aren't able to put together any offensive success back-to-back weeks against two teams that you view yourself superior than, it's very clear that you are no longer in the prominent light of the people who are writing your checks. And so they said, let's go ahead and write a big check and fix the problem without actually going out and fixing the problem. It's going to be a long, long offseason for LSU, but I got to give him credit. I was completely flabbergasted that Brian Kelly was no longer the head coach of LSU after a loss against Texas A&M. Thought it would be next year for sure. Maybe he leaves and goes takes a job at Penn State in the offseason, but never in a million years would you have told me, hey, Brian Kelly's going to be fired in 2026. Never would I have believed that. And honestly, I don't know if anybody else would. Biggest disappointment? It's Arkansas. Arkansas has not won a college football game since week 2. I want to make that clear. Arkansas has not won a college football game since week 2. They were mollywopped by Notre Dame. They fought back and nearly pulled off the upset against Tennessee. They lose to Texas A&M. Even though it was a 3-point swing, never felt like it was in jeopardy. And then you face off against Auburn. And Auburn, you were supposed to be able to find a way to win. And you had moments where, hey, things were trending upward. And then you decide to drop the ball by having a 3-interception game by Taylor Green. And the defense allows both Jackson Arnold and Ashton Daniels to put up points. And now you're looking at a 7-loss record. And on top of that, you still have games, remind you, against LSU, on the road against LSU, at Texas and at Missouri, or home against Missouri. We're talking about a 3-9 season at best. We're talking about a 2-10 season very much being in the works. 10 straight losses to close out 2025. Not a good sign for Bobby Petrino and company. And definitely not a good sign for anybody that's going to come on in and try to fix the program, because there's going to be a lot of work that needs to happen behind closed doors. Biggest disappointment as a player, it's got to be Garrett Nussmeier. Like, I bought into Garrett Nussmeier as definitely being the dude this year. He was going to figure some things out. And I gave him a lot of credit. You know, bad offensive line play, the inability to run the football. Certainly the play designs were absolutely kind of hit and miss at times. But there were moments in that game against Vanderbilt where it just didn't look like he was right. There were moments in the game against LSU where he clearly did not look like he was right. And then you got to look back at those matchups that you had earlier on in the season when he faced off against Ole Miss, had some very, very bad decision-making, wasn't really finding his footing, kind of regressed when it came to the signal calling, and specifically when it came to the overall ambiance of his space and surroundings. Kind of started taking sacks, kind of got a little bit lackluster when it came to the overall persona. And the worst part is you could see the dissolvement of his image from being a guy that people respected and a guy that people thought was going to be the number 1 overall pick to, can I just get through the season unscathed? Like, it's very disappointing to see how far fallen from grace Garrett Nussmeier has gone in literally just the last month and a half. Because honestly, if you go back to that game against Clemson in week 1, he wasn't great, but you know what? You thought it was a building block. Now it just looks like more and more that was probably the reality of it not being a good year and him and Joe Sloan not being a great fit. Biggest regret that I have, believe me, in Brian Kelly. I have been on this show multiple times over the last, I don't even know, 2 years, saying that Brian Kelly was a top 10 coach in college football, top 5 coach in the SEC. He'd figure it out. I have to eat crow. I instantly regret ever saying all those things. I believe that from the culture standpoint, it would have worked out at LSU. Not because I thought that he'd be a great fit with the Foghorn Leghorn crap, but also I thought it would just be a good fit because he wins. And people got to remember, he won a lot at Notre Dame. And I figured it would eventually transition. And there were moments where, hey, you have a Heisman Trophy quarterback. You have a first-round wide receiver. You got 2 first-round wide receivers. You brought in a good defensive play caller. It's a team that feels like it's trending upward. And then I have to remember the yeah, but theory. And the yeah, but theory for years with Brian Kelly has been, yeah, we have this, but we're missing this. And that was something that hindered his success at Notre Dame. And that was something that hindered his success at at Cincinnati. And that was something that hindered his success at LSU. And every single year, it felt like LSU was taking a step forward. But behind closed doors, they really had so many other faults to where you're asking yourself, yeah, but what's the excuse this time, BK? Like what is it at this point to where I have to start believing that it isn't just on you? And that was on me, and it's the biggest regret. And I hate doing that. And unfortunately, at this point, now I no longer can go ahead and defend Brian Kelly. Now I have to go ahead and live in the world where the internet now has multiple tweets of me saying Brian Kelly is a great coach, when honestly, he was probably never going to be the right guy down in Baton Rouge. Worst coaching job of the month, it's easily Hugh Freeze. And the reason I say Hugh Freeze is because of Hugh Freeze had a persona in multiple games where it felt like momentum immediately shifted the second he didn't get a call. And you could tell that was a major thing because of the way the sidelines reacted afterwards. How the win against Arkansas, so we can't take that away from him. But the call against Jackson Arnold in the Georgia game, what happened after that? Every single drive, it just felt like Auburn stalled, didn't care, and they were lifeless offensively because the call didn't go your way. Then the Missouri game, there was a play that there was supposed to be a pass interference call. I believe it was against Malcolm Simmons. I believe that's who it was against. And nothing. Didn't get it. The rest of the fourth quarter, if you looked out at the sidelines, there was no atmosphere. There was nothing. It was sullen. And guys, I hate to be the very bad news. This was in a tie game. This was Auburn still had a shot to win. But the persona of the coach to say, oh, well, the refs aren't going to help us out here. Oh, well, the refs are going to screw us on this play. Well, it transitioned over to the players saying that, hey, if our coach doesn't believe that we can win this football game, why should we do it? And to me, that says such a moronic option when it comes to coaching that it's very hard to buy into you being the right guy to fix the problems. Because, again, you see the plays, you see the moments, it's just not good. I will go ahead and defend Auburn because of the worst call of the month, in my opinion, absolutely no questions asked, was the one against Jackson Arnold. If you were to be in this conversation once like we did last month, it again feels like even if you thought that the ball should have been crossing the pylon, the refs having that opportunity to renegotiate, look at it, and see it was at least fair enough to go ahead and believe, yeah, he crossed it. Replay showed the ball breaking the plane. Replay showed Jackson Arnold crossed the pylon as the ball began to punch its way on out. And because of it was called on the field a fumble first, they decided not to go ahead and negate it. They kicked a field goal. You had multiple penalties that set up a field goal. It allowed it to become a 10-point swing. And ultimately, at that standpoint, this is where we now saw Georgia respond in the second half. And Georgia would go on to win 20-10. Now, I don't know if Georgia would have won this game, or I don't know if Auburn would have been able to hold on out if it was 17-0, but I can tell you this much. That call altered the entire pathway for a victory on the Plains and an upset. It did. If they end up getting that call, do we see a more jovial, a more aggressive, and probably a bit more in his bag element Hugh Freeze making the play call? Or do we see just complete implosion? It doesn't really matter at this standpoint, but from the level of what was that play on the field, there wasn't enough conclusive evidence to say ball came out. There was more conclusive evidence to say he crossed the pylon as the ball came out. Therefore, because of it crossed first, should have been a touchdown, and it wasn't. And unfortunately for Auburn fans, it's another week where we have to go out here and have the same type of conversation. The best press conference? Oh my God, Jeff Landry. I mean, the Louisiana governor decided to go ahead and bring everyone's attention down to the bayou and kind of ask yourself, what would happen if we gave a character made from Looney Tunes political affairs? Right there. That's what we saw. The abrasiveness, the intellect, the inability to be able to understand certain policies that go to the world of college football, all on display in the span of 3.5 minutes. To then also blatantly come after the current athletic director that understandably had to be let go because of what happened with the 2 hires that were made in the previous last 2 spots. But to berate him in the public eye and make it abundantly clear that his days were numbered. You don't get that type of things on Jerry Springer. You don't get that type of things on Moore. You get that in the state of Louisiana on a Wednesday afternoon. I mean, how are you not watching the press conference 50,000 times and each time finding a way to laugh harder? And also, how are you not finding ways to make it funnier? Like just being able to go put a laugh track behind it, or going and finding the Curb Your Enthusiasm music afterwards, or anything along those lines. Because when you have that happen for you, my goodness, it is probably the most comical 5 minutes that I have seen online in probably the last 2 years. And the last one, far and away, in my opinion. Excuse me a second. There we go. Last one, worst game of the month. It was Kentucky, Texas, week 8. Folks, let me just make this clear. For those of you that don't remember this game, Texas won in overtime, 16-13. I'm going to read you off the stats. That way everyone understands. Texas was out first down 19 times, 26-8. They were worse on third down, 17-18, 55-16. Total yards. Kentucky outgained them by almost 200. Over 200. My apologies. I am so disrespectful to Kentucky on that. They were outrushed 137-47. They had more yards per completion attempt, 6.5 to 4.9. They won the time of possession by 19 minutes. They had fewer penalties, and they were better on 4th down conversions. But the problem is that Kentucky couldn't finish drives. Kentucky put itself in a position where they tried to go for the jugular, and instead they got a paper cut. And Texas did enough to keep themselves in the game to where it got to overtime, and all they had to do at that point was just make sure, hey, Mason Shipley, drill this 45-yarder. We call it a day. I mean, remember, Texas was actually leading 13-10 with 57 seconds left in the game. And here comes Jacob Coway, and he ends up tying it with 9 seconds left. Mason Shipley had to go ahead and be the hero. Just a disgusting affair. Mark Stoops fighting for his job at this point. Culture being questioned out in the likes of Lexington. If you would have had that win, people would have been looking at Texas in such a different persona. And more specifically, we'd be looking at Kentucky in a different persona. But ultimately, there's nothing more to say. Just a disgusting overall performance on both sides. One team that probably should have won if you look at the stat line, and another team that we hyped up to be the number 1 roster in college football that had to understand playing in Lexington's a lot different than playing in Ames, Iowa out in the Big 12. But those are my superlatives for the month of October. Let me know in the comment section down below. What are your superlatives? Which one do you agree with? Which one do you disagree with? Like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure you're following us on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson, at SEC Unfiltered, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. Until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. We are in the month of November, which means we got a ton of superlatives and a ton of chaos coming your way. Don't miss out right here on SEC Unfiltered. Bye.